Mario, one of the most popular video game characters ever. Ever since I was a young kid, I always loved this franchise and its games. From platformers to RPGs, this franchise has a vast library of games that anyone can enjoy. With the success of the Switch and the recent animated movie, the popularity of Mario has never been bigger. I've played my fair share of these games, if not most of them. So I thought to myself, why don't I rank every Mario game? And I'm not just talking about the 3D RPGs or just the sports games. I mean every single Mario game. By the end of me creating this list of games, I had over 200 selections. When does an obsession go too far? Now, unlike a lot of other franchises, the Mario one is a bit complicated. There are specific games that we obviously know are Mario games, but there are some that are a bit more confusing, like what makes a Mario game a Mario game? Does he have to be the main character? Or can he just be playable? Or heck, does he just need to appear in it for it to be called a Mario game? The rules what I chose for what makes a Mario game is that 1, his name has to be in the title, or 2, at least playable, and 3, at the very slightest themed around him. Throughout this list, there will probably be a few confusing choices for what I chose and dismissed to be a Mario game. I will do my best to explain on why those are the ones I chose. But if there's some I didn't convince you on, or think that I missed a specific game, please tell me in the comments below. And on your way, please subscribe and give this video a like. I'm not going to be the same person I was after going through this entire list of 200 video games, so subscribing can be the very least you can do. While you're down there, tell me your favorite Mario game. There are several franchises in the Mario universe that aren't Mario games. In this list, I won't be going over the Donkey Kong series, the Luigi's Mansion series, the Yoshi series, the couple of Peach games, and the Captain Toad game. I also won't be ranking all the old official Flash games, due to not being able to play them anymore. But if I had the option, I would. And yes, there was such a thing as official Nintendo Flash games. Surprising, I know. There's also a plethora of old Mario watches out there that allow you to play specific games on them. But due to not having easy access to them and being really expensive, I likewise will be unable to review them. I'm also debating in my head whether or not they actually count as Mario games. I also won't be going over any ports, but as the video goes on, you'll start to see the struggle I had on trying to figure out what games were ports and what were different enough to be able to make it onto this list. What I'm going to do is group up and rank these games from each 5 years, starting with the 80s and ending in the 2020s. Resetting the ranked list after each 5 years. At the end of the video, I will rank every single game all together in one entire list. Quick side note, I was going to make this into one full video, decided just to cut it into several parts. That is until I managed to finish ranking every single game, which after I'll put all parts into one long video. This video will be going over all the Mario games from 1980 to 1985. Remember what I said before about not going over the other Mario series, like the Luigi's Mansion and Peach games? Well, there is one game from each of the DK and Yoshi series that I have decided are part of the Mario series. One of them being the first one on this list, the game that started it all, the first game ever in the Mario franchise. It's the classic arcade game that everyone and their grandparents has played. It's fun. I've always had an enjoyable time playing it. It hasn't aged the best, having only 4 levels to repeat through, with Mario having smaller than expected jumps from the guy literally called Jumpman, and dying from even the smallest of heights is a little annoying. It's not a game you're always going to be coming back to, but from time to time, it's an enjoyable experience. There are of course sequels to this game, like Donkey Kong Jr. and Donkey Kong Jr. Math, but Mario isn't the playable character in those, so I would consider those to be part of the Donkey Kong series. There isn't a lot more to say about this game. It's a classic arcade game that started a lifelong series of games, featuring and debuting 2 of the most popular video game icons ever. Obviously going on top of this list, being the only game so far. Here it is, the first game with the name Mario Brothers. Let's go play... What's this? So apparently the first ever Mario Brothers is not the one we're all knowledge upon, the game where we see the Mario Brothers as plumbers. No, apparently they first started working at a bottling plant, where they were tasked to bring the packages of bottles into the truck. This was one of the biggest surprises to me, and we were only in the second game of this list. But how's the game? Well, it's a Game & Watch game. There isn't a lot to say. Though I would say I would prefer other Game & Watch titles more, going under Donkey Kong. Wow, okay, I guess Mario got sick of the bottling plant and decided to start working at a cement factory. Again, the gameplay is just... But we are only 3 games into this list, and I never knew these things about Mario. You thought Mario having a PhD was weird? Wait until Cement Worker Mario makes it into the next Smash game. You might wonder why I'm not saying much about these Game & Watch games, but must I remind you that the gameplay of these games is just... If it came down to it, I probably would choose this game over the other one. There's not much of a reason, because I don't ever see myself playing either of these games ever again. But going above Mario Brothers, but below Donkey Kong. Finally, the Mario Brothers game. It's a fun time. When playing with a friend, you can choose whether or not to work together or try to kill each other by knocking the other player into the enemies. Though I would say that this game hasn't aged the best, with you not really being able to change your direction in the air after you jump, making it a little frustrating to try to play nowadays. I like the newer version of this game, like the ones on the Game Boy Advance, so it shows that I do like the concept of the original arcade game, but the janky movement really doesn't do it any favors. With that said, I would rather play it over any Game & Watch game. Above Mario Cement Factory, but below Donkey Kong. Well, after being in a bottle plant, then to a cement factory, and then finally a plumber, Mario's next step in life was to join the army. Mario must keep bombs away from lighting on fire to give to another fellow soldier, to use to blow up their enemies. It's wild to think about Mario being in a war, but here he is, showing us that there is nothing that Mario can't and won't do. Being another Game & Watch game, there isn't too much it can do to be that high on this list, but it is the best out of all the other Game & Watch games, going above Mario Cement Factory, but below Mario Brothers. Mario Brothers Special. Out of every game so far, this one might be the weirdest. It's a version of the arcade Mario Brothers, with this one being on a computer, but instead of the same level layout and the objective being that of killing all the enemies, this version of the game has you going through 4 different levels, with you either getting to the top of the screen or collecting all of the dollar signs. These levels repeat, getting harder and harder until you game over. It's interesting, though I'd rather the simple gameplay of the original arcade Mario Brothers, going below Mario Brothers, but above Mario's Bombs Away. This is our what? 4th game with Mario Brothers in the name? And we haven't even reached the Super Mario Brothers? This is Punchball Mario Brothers. It's almost like the arcade version of Mario Brothers. Instead of flipping over enemies by hitting the floor beneath them, you now just throw a ball at them to flip them over. It's funny how when you throw your ball, you have to go pick it up to use it again. The concept itself is what does a lot of caring for this game. Above Mario Brothers Special, but below the original Mario Brothers. Can't beat the original. This game is pretty decent. After the war, Mario decided to work for a construction company, with the newly animated movie confirming that this was Mario and Luigi's jobs before quitting and starting their own plumbing business. It's a very much shut your brain off and play kind of game. I would imagine it to be more of a puzzle game of trying to figure out what things you should break first to last, while avoiding the enemies that kind of just roam around. There are quick minigames in it where you and Spike have to race to find the coin in one of the multiple lockers all organized all across the screen. Overall, it's nothing too special, but I would be lying if I said that I didn't enjoy coming back to this game from time to time. And honestly, I say it holds up better than the arcade Mario Brothers. Again, the jumping and movement in that game is so wonky. So, I'd rate it better than Mario Brothers, but below Donkey Kong. Here we have the start of the Versus series of games for the arcades. These are basically the same versions of games from the NES. The list of Mario games in this Versus lineup includes Versus Wrecking Crew, Versus Super Mario Bros., and Versus Dr. Mario. This list of games gives me a headache, because again, I'm not including ports of games on this list, but there's enough of a difference with these games that I feel grudgingly reluctant to add them into this list. The later two at least have more of a difference from its original game, but this one, Versus Wrecking Crew, is basically just the same exact game. But like the name implies, you're versing another player to see who can get the most points. It's good. Again, it's just Wrecking Crew, but now you have an opponent to go up against. But I honestly think that makes it more fun to play. With one player being in the foreground and the other being in the background, you can hit them to knock them down. And with enemies being in both the foreground and background, only being able to hurt the player on the side they are on, you as the player can open the doors to lead the enemies on your side to your opponent's side, making the game easier for you and the game harder for the other player, who now has more enemies to deal with. The original game was alright, but it felt like it was missing something. This version of the game fills in that empty feeling, making the game more fun to play, going above the original Wrecking Crew, but below Donkey Kong. Here we finally are, the game that technically started it all, the game that defined gaming. During a time of oversaturation of terrible games in the video game market, it showed us what a good game could look like. The Super Mario Bros. You could make the argument that it has aged a bit, but it still feels amazing to play today. My only real complaint of the game is that you don't get that big of a jump or any of that matter off of enemies after jumping off of them. But the movement in this game is so clean. For being a game back in the 80s, it's a dream that the movement was as good as it was, and still is, being so clean and feeling great to control. Of course, later games in this franchise improve on that movement and control. But for the game that started it all, it's amazing. Everything in this game has carried its way to other games in the series. Everything about it is still all iconic after all of these years. Everyone knows the 1-1 theme. It's the Mario song. This game, of course, goes straight to the top of the list. No doubt about that. This is the game who established the household name of Mario. This was an alright first 5 years for Nintendo. I would say it started strong with Donkey Kong, and ended even stronger with Super Mario Bros. But everything in between was a little rough. Mostly just Game & Watch games and remixes of the same game. It makes sense though. It took a while for Mario to get his footing. From enlisting into the army to working at a cement factory, Mario finally figured out that plumbing is where it is at. With Mario's first game on the NES going pretty well, I'm excited to see what's next in store for this plumber.